Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, July 18th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Cottonetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Day 3 of the Republican National Convention concluded last night with the acceptance of the vice presidential nomination by J.D. Vance and his 33-minute speech, all of which was overshadowed by the announcement earlier in the day that Joe Biden has COVID, that he was leaving the campaign trail, that he was going back to Delaware, where he would self-isolate in an eerie echo of 2020, where he was self-isolating in order not to get COVID. Now he will be self-isolating because he has COVID. And I bring this up and compare and contrast the two because this was Vance's introduction on a national stage. And even as he was speaking, you could tell that the commentariat and the news reporters and everybody else were already shifting. We're much less interested in this question than the question of, has Nancy Pelosi decided that Joe Biden has to go and has told him to go? Yes, apparently she has. So did Chuck Schumer. On Sunday, we're told they both told him he had to go. And apparently they're willing to do other kinds of things to see that he gets out of the race. So do we want to talk substantively about the Vance speech, or do we want to talk politically about Biden first? We'll talk about both. I give you, Matt, the...
Well, thank you, John. I think we should talk about Biden first.
Okay.
It's the bigger story in a way. If an incumbent president withdraws from the race to reelect him, that does overshadow, I think, Vance's debut, which is also a big story. But let's talk about Biden first. The news broke around 6 p.m. Eastern time. Biden was leaving Vegas. He canceled some events. We got the notice from the White House that he had been tested positive for COVID. The description in the Axios morning newsletter of Biden going up the short stairs, the shorter staircase to Air Force One, says, and I quote, "President Biden walked gingerly up the steps of Air Force One and retreated into self-isolation last night." Gingerly is not the word I would use to describe how Biden walked up those stairs. Biden looked ill. He walked very slowly. He seemed unsteady. There was footage of him later in the evening at his arrival in Delaware, where, again, getting into the car, he seemed to be having trouble. And the diagnosis actually, in some ways, does Biden a favor because it displaces the news from his appearances yesterday, which were also terrible. And amazingly, at one point, he seems to have forgotten the name of his Secretary of Defense in an interview with BET.
But didn't forget his skin color.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That was the key. The black man that I appointed.
Yeah.
So and once again, in whataboutism world, imagine that coming out of the mouth of Donald Trump or any Republican. The black man.
It's like they decided to update King Lear. You know how those Shakespearean theaters put on modern productions of Shakespearean plays? Well, apparently God decided to do that with Joe Biden. And so we have King Lear here alone in his beach house, kind of removed from the world, and having to deal with the many top Democrats saying that there's no way the Democratic Party can win with him on the top of the ticket. Just one final point. I think probably the most important conversation Biden has had in past 72 hours is not necessarily, or even going back to Saturday, it's not necessarily with Chuck Schumer. It's not necessarily with Hakeem Jeffries. I don't know if he's talking to Pelosi. Pelosi's talking to everybody else in order to push him out. It was with Jeffrey Katzenberg. So he met with the Hollywood mogul yesterday prior to his events. And the reporting we receive was that Katzenberg told him the money is beginning to dry up, not just for you, Mr. President, but for other candidates down ballot, which I find hard to grasp. But that old saying that if something can't go on, it won't. If the money dries up, it will be hard for Joe Biden to go on.
So there is a systematic thing going on here. It has to be understood as systematic. Adam Schiff, the congressman who is obviously going to win the Senate race in California in November, was the first important politician, supposedly, to come out and explicitly say that Biden should get out of the race. Now, let's talk about what it means that he was the one who said it. First of all, he is running, he's famous with the liberal MSNBC type crowd. Second, he's got a completely safe race. So there can be no consequences to him for coming out and saying that Biden is he's going to win. He's not going to be in a position where anyone can really punish him. And the implicit thing that he is saying is, I don't want to go into the Senate in the minority, and I'm going to the Senate in the minority if Biden stays at the top of the ticket. That didn't come out of nowhere. It's almost as though there is a conspiracy inside the Democratic Party to figure out how to put out a story every 2 or 3 hours that just takes a mallet and smashes it over Joe Biden's head until he says uncle. So there was the Schiff story, and then there was the story about Schumer on Sunday telling Biden he has no path to victory. And then there are these stories that Pelosi showed. Schumer and Pelosi have both shown Biden polls that say that he can't win. So it isn't just that people are independently coming to the same conclusion. There is clearly an organized effort at the top levels of the Democratic Party to figure out a way to get Joe Biden to quit by threatening him with data and frightening him. And of course, the question then comes up, Abe, does he have COVID? I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, and either way, let me just say, those of us who have had elderly relatives who have gotten COVID in their 80s or 90s, it is a bad. Now I don't know. He has a new strain, so he has whatever is the strain that's going around now. But COVID hits old people very hard, and taking Paxlovid, which he has done, or says he has done, is very hard on the system. That is not a gentle curative. And so
I go if he has COVID until proven otherwise. But it does have to be considered also in light of the fact that earlier in the day he had said, well, in answer to the question, what would take you out of the race? Well, if a doctor diagnosed me with something and said I had this and that, and then he said, and then about 2 hours later, there was the COVID diagnosis. I don't know that the, excuse me, that the this and that would take him out of the race in that kind of thinking would be COVID, exactly. So it's almost too cute, too neat, I think, to work with as an actual conspiracy theory. But what did start happening soon after the announcement of his COVID diagnosis, very subtle, slow-moving, largely anonymous rumors that Biden was suddenly more receptive to reconsidering the idea of dropping out of the race.
Or he's not yelling at the people who bring it up. I think that was, if you read the reporting very closely, relying on all these anonymous sources is, I think, a fool's game. At the end of the day, the decision will be Biden's. And the reporting we do know is that his inner circle has basically collapsed to his family and maybe one or two longtime advisors. And you have to wonder, what are they thinking at this moment with the president in isolation? Maybe some of them think that it's a good thing because it will get him off the stage for a little bit, allow people to focus on Trump. The polls aren't good for Biden. There are national polls that are better for Biden. For me, this conversation is going to continue and it's going to require somebody to say that they're willing to challenge Biden at the convention, I believe, for it to really kind of make a decision point here.
Okay, I got to make the conspiracy case. The conspiracy case is that Biden is going to pull out of the race because he will say, I need every ounce of strength in my body, or this country needs to be saved from Trump. And I don't know that I have it in me, given the disease that I have gotten, to do that. And Kamala Harris is young and hearty and healthy and in great shape, and a great leader for the future. And I will be leaving. I am committing the delegates to her. The delegates that we have, 99% of the delegates are committed to the Biden-Harris ticket, and she will succeed me. She will beat Donald Trump, and she will lead us into a glorious future. We'll see. I'm saying, don't say that what I'm saying doesn't make perfect sense, because he's not saying I have a major disease. He's not saying he would not be saying
Trump had COVID while he was president, and he still ran for re-election. And Trump's 3 years younger.
I'm saying that goes to my conspiracy theory thing, which is
right,
that he needs a graceful exit.
He doesn't want to withdraw.
No. If my theory is right, he has decided to withdraw.
Yeah, he has not.
Something happened yesterday. Okay, you're saying he hasn't, and no. I'm saying he has. Okay,
he's the Mad King. He's around there. He doesn't know where he is half the time. I mean, it's sad to watch these speeches, even the speeches in front of the audience before the interview in Las Vegas. He loses his place. He has a teleprompter. He's losing his place, and he has his wife, Lady Macbeth, there saying, "You got to run. You got to do it for the country."
We're moving all over the Shakespeare map here. This is amazing. We got Lady Macbeth.
It's a mashup. Yeah,
this makes Nancy Pelosi Goneril.
Yeah, who's Hunter? Yeah, loves Labor's Lost or something.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know. I'm just saying I am almost never a believer that people literally proffer. Although Donald Trump proffered a lot of clear, absolute, out and out lies.
Well, I just think there's a major historical event that happened within the past week that is ripe for conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And you moved to the conspiracy theory that the COVID they're making it up that he has COVID.
If you're Biden and you want a graceful exit, and you don't want to say, I understand that America doesn't want me to be the leader going forward, so I have to step out so that we can have a Hail Mary play to beat Trump.
How about the Parkinson's disease he probably has? Like, wouldn't that be?
That's what I'm saying. He doesn't want to say he has Parkinson's disease, because that would mean that he had been lying to the American people about having Parkinson's. You can catch COVID in a day, and therefore he can say, I can't do it. Okay, that's if this is a 20% possibility, but it isn't a 5% possibility. And the minute that it happened, I was on Mark Halperin's very interesting two-way discussion program that you can watch on YouTube. And in the chat of the two-way participants, instantly half the people said this is, he's just looking to get out. So it's not just me coming up with like nonsense argle-bargle. And by the way, you mentioned the coming down the steps. You said getting into the car in Delaware.
Right.
It wasn't just that. When he got off the plane and they showed the footage of him coming off the plane, there are 6 or 7 steps, something like that. And he froze in the middle of walking down the staircase. He was walking down the staircase. He stopped and didn't move for, 10 seconds. And then very slowly again began to move. And once again, though, I believe he doesn't want to leave the race, and I believe everything you're saying nominally makes sense to me. I don't understand how that guy gets to November. So I don't understand how he gets to next Thursday.
So there's so many questions. I mean, one question is, if he does withdraw from the race because of his health, isn't it natural to wonder why is he remaining as president if his health is somehow compromised? I mean, for the safety of the country.
All right. That's the genius of my COVID theory, which is that he can say, I have COVID, and it's going to have some impact on my ability to govern, to run, because I need to not get other people sick, and blah, blah, blah. And I just, I need to be, this needs to be a 24/7 salvation effort to get Donald Trump out. And I am committing myself to that task. And I don't think right now that am in a position to do that in the best possible way. So it's not that he had it before. It's not that he can't be president now. It's a disease that will cure itself. But so as a face saver, you can see it means he didn't lie about what he had before. No one's going to ask whether he had, no, we're not going to have this conspiracy theory about Parkinson's or Lewy body dementia or whatever. And everyone in the Democratic Party is going to go, what a hero, what a noble gesture he has made. God bless him. And and look, you know what? If Trump had been a better president, he wouldn't have gotten COVID. I mean, he'll blame.
But I mean, but no matter what, if he goes with this, and if he drops out now for whatever reason, it turns the next 6 months, and there's 6 months left in his presidency, into a sort of round-the-clock medical drama. I mean, every day, watching every step, every interview, who's running, who's going to respond to this,
and how does it connect with the eventual nominee?
Yeah.
So, two items from X. I'm making the transition. I'm beginning today. It's no longer
X?
known by it. It's the dead name. The new name is X. Two posts on X I found were very interesting. The first was a reference to some poll that's being circulated among Democrats that shows that the age issue is now seeping into down ballot races because voters are angry at the Democrats for covering up Biden's condition. Right. So if he were to withdraw and it were to be because of his age or his health, I think Abe's absolutely right. The real question is what is going on with the age and his health and who has covered it up? I mean, that question has been live for some time, but it becomes even more important, I think, in the event of his withdrawal from the race. The second post on X, Bakari Sellers, the DNC flack who's on CNN a lot, CNN contributor, he simply tweeted, "You pass over Kamala Harris at your peril." Mm-hmm. And that to me signals that there are many Democrats who do not want the nomination to go to Kamala Harris, and Bakari is responding to them. So I ask you, John Podhoretz.
Yes.
Who is the nominee?
Kamala Harris.
You think it goes straight to Kamala?
I think, first of all, that is the rational thing to do. Let me just explain this for a second, because on this two-way, I was on with my old friend Jonathan Alter, long of Newsweek, now at the Washington Monthly. Jonathan Alter said this will be great. Like this, there's going to be. Here's what happens: Obama, Clinton, and maybe even Biden go into a room together, and they pick out three people to run against Kamala Harris. They pick them, and then there's going to be debates. It'll be a four-week bake-off. It'll be good for her because it'll season her. It'll give her a chance to make her case for the American people. And then they come to the convention and probably nominate her. But I mean, who knows? And then, or the bake-off is for the vice presidential nominee. Could be Whitmer, could be Shapiro, could be I don't know who else. And so this will be great. It'll be exciting, enthusiastic, blah 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 blah. Okay, now maybe I would enjoy it. That would be great. Like this year has been unprecedented. We had really boring politics for 18 months where nothing happened except that Trump and Biden were at 44% in the polls together. Kind of still there in a funny way, but nonetheless, suddenly the last 6-7 weeks, everything went haywire. Trump's convicted, nothing happens in the polls. Biden gets sicker, the assassination attempt, the debate, all of this. So let's just keep it going. Have August as the craziest month in American history, unprecedented, somebody stepping down in the middle of a presidential race, and then they have this bake-off for 4 weeks, and that's why it won't happen. Here's why I think it won't, which is, why would you do that? It's too unpredictable. You have no idea what the end game is. You have to set up events and create circumstances and conditions for a primary campaign that will affect only 4,000 delegates who are going to make this choice. It is bananas because all advance work in politics is about avoiding the mistakes that have been made before that you can see, that having seen them, you can prevent. And here we will have something where you won't know hour by hour what is going to happen, who's going to make a speech. By the way, also setting up the Republican Party for a four-way oppo dump, candidates running in states or having been governors in states where there is no longer local press that have spent, a decade or more or whatever, like investigating them. Who knows what could people know about Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom or something like that? You think that they're all battle hardened? I mean, the thing to do would be to have a rerun of 2020. You'd have Klobuchar and Buttigieg. You would have people who actually went through the kiln and have some seasoning. And so to me, it seems like a gimme that if you go, you have to go with Harris. And here's the other part. And I want you to see if you both can respond to this. The national polling is important because it does show that there is still a race, which is to say this question of whether Trump nationally has a ceiling. And it really looks, and Mark Mellman again on Mark Halpern's two-way said, it really looks like Trump has a very, very serious ceiling. And the ceiling is around 47%, meaning while we look at this and say they shot at him without result from 2020, to today, shot at Trump without result, and then literally shot at Trump without result. Not that they did that, but, he was shot at without result. That, he's standing tall and it's not true. Like, Trump has been injured by the last 3 years. If he hadn't been injured, he'd be ahead by 10, given Biden's condition and the debate. 45% of the United States, or 46%, is not going to vote for Donald Trump. I think people who have this idea that he's going to win 40 states or he's going to be Reagan in 80 or something like that need to disabuse themselves of this collective effervescence, because the American people don't like Trump. More than 60% still disapprove of him. They are just looking head to head, particularly in the battleground states, at the choice before them and are saying, well, I don't, in states that Trump won and Biden won, and saying, well, I guess, I don't know, I mean, I voted for Trump once, maybe I'll do it again, coming home to Trump in Georgia and in a couple of other places. This is a winnable race for Kamala Harris. Okay, maybe. Matt is literally like,
I'm just looking at
see him because you have to read these national polls, I think, through the lens of what we've known about the Trump era. And what we've known about the Trump era is that Trump has never been ahead in any polls ever. But beginning in last September, according to the Real Clear Politics average, Trump overtook Biden, and he has never been behind him since. And so you're right. Currently in the RCP average, Trump has about a 2.5 point, 3 point lead. What that means, though, is that the nation as a whole has swung about 7 points or more toward Trump from Biden to Trump since 2020. Right.
And that's a huge deal, because what it means is all those swing states, which were so narrowly lost by Trump, are now +3, +4, +5.
Right. Well, that's what we saw last night, by the way. The Emerson poll, which is not the best of polls.
No.
But the Emerson poll, combined with private polling that we keep hearing about, says that in the 8, I think it's now 8, they're polling 8 swing states, Trump is ahead beyond the margin of error. Right. That's why I'm saying.
That's why I think the national polls, and this was my issue with Kornacki last week or whenever we talked to him, I think the national polls are somewhat misleading, because essentially what you have now are 8 Senate races. And the national swing toward Trump means that those Senate races are actually, that is the Senate, the where Trump is versus
Trump
Biden
is the senator.
right? He's the senator. Right.
Trump and
he's
Biden
actually pulling. He's
state.
pulling away with it.
Yeah.
And so here's what Harris could possibly do, which I will concede. Having Harris at the top of the ticket might allow her and the Democrats to claw back black voters to some degree and young voters to some degree. Now, she would lose other voters. I don't think Harris does anything for the Democratic Party with the Hispanic vote. It may even make the Democrats' problem with Hispanics worse with her at the top of the ticket. But she could pull some of these youthful voters, some of these black voters back into the Democratic coalition, and that could narrow the shift to Trump. And what that means is the number of swing states consolidates too. That makes it a more competitive race,
right? But
I still think it makes it a race that the Democrats are about to lose, and so that's why I don't think that you're right. These polls are competitive. The parties of the right have actually been underperforming the polls recently.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you look at what's happening in the states and when you look at the coalition that Trump is forming, he's not popular. But with this Democratic Party, he's in a position to win.
Abe,
I also think that there's no hard reason to assume that the ceiling continues to hold as it has, Trump's ceiling. A lot of unprecedented things have happened to him very recently.
Yeah.
And he's quite different, at least in public appearance, than he
we'll
had
see.
been.
We'll see. Because
we'll see is right.
We'll see who he is tonight.
Sure.
When he speaks for an hour. Okay.
Let's see. I guess my point is, I don't think this election is about Trump. It's about Biden.
Right.
And then it's about the larger Democratic Party and what they have done. And so swapping Kamala for Biden just kind of swaps out a new set of problems for an older set of problems, because you have no idea how she's going to perform. I mean, she's ridiculous.
I know. I agree, but you are swapping out the biggest problem, which is that Biden can't win. I believe now it is impossible for Biden to win because of his age.
And by the way, I just want to say, you're only swapping out part of that problem. You're actually bringing in, you're highlighting one aspect of the problem. Part of the problem with Biden's age was that we're going to end up with Kamala as president. In this, we're cutting straight to that.
Okay, so let's say I'm wrong, and he won't just make it Kamala, and it won't just be Kamala, though. I think it is more important than people realize that be the case for two reasons. I mean, this is not I'm not a party person. I'm not a Democratic person. So
before we do that, though, who do you think she would pick as vice president?
I think she would pick Whitmer.
I think she would pick Shapiro.
Interesting. I do want to say just for a second that my skepticism about Shapiro as the nominee, though it makes political sense, obviously, because they need Pennsylvania. He won Pennsylvania by 9. He's 51. I said the other day that he was 61, which was a stupid mistake, and I apologize for that. He's 51. He's very impressive. He's a really good speaker. He is a Sabbath observant Jew. And I gotta say,
the Democrats have nominated a Sabbath observant Jew for vice president.
That was a different party 25 years ago, and they nominated a religious man. Al Gore chose a religious man, and a close friend of his, to make an implicit critical point about the person that he was succeeding, but wanted to separate himself from. So I'm just saying, I don't know that if you go and what you want to do is appeal to young people and African Americans, that you go with the relatively moderate Sabbath observant Jew. I'm sorry. So that's one of the reasons I say Whitmer. Also, Whitmer is like Gore and Clinton, which is that they might want to double down on women, women, abortion, women.
Yeah. Well, I have a completely different read on the situation. Okay. I think that you are appealing to women and to African American voters and to younger voters by having Kamala at the top of the ticket. You're also appealing to the people who have been more critical of Biden's policy on Israel from the left, because Kamala has staked out this bizarre position where she is, pro-Israel rhetorically, but then she's also kind of telegraphing her deep concerns to left-wing outlets and bragging about how she was, at the forefront of getting feminine hygienic products to Gaza in the beginning of the war. So then you, from a balancing point of view, a conventional wisdom point of view, would say, okay, well, how do we supplement that, what the top of the ticket is doing? Well, how about a Sabbath observant Jew who's an extremely popular governor of the most important state in the election, right? And by the way, there are some real problems with the Jewish vote, which we can get the podcast can get into. Yeah. And so, but here's the way to signal, hey, it's not just the second gentleman who is Vice President Harris's outreach to the Jewish community. It's also Josh Shapiro, who is a very popular governor. So that's my case for Shapiro.
Okay, it's a good case, and I understand your point, and I still say
I mean, if it's a Harris-Whitmer ticket, I'm going into the bunker. Okay, I'll see you later. I'm buying gold. I'm going into the bunker.
Okay, the reason I said Gore Clinton is that it was thought that it was crazy for Clinton to pick Gore because they both had comparable appeals. They were from neighboring states. You wanted geographic diversity, and you might want viewpoint diversity. You want a liberal to counter Clinton, who was running sort of as a conservative. And the decision of the Clinton team was no. We want to emphasize our special
I'm going to give
sauce.
You two other options for her.
Yeah. Okay.
Because she's very unpopular. And the media project of boosting her since the debate is, to me, farcical. And she is not going to rise to the occasion. If I'm wrong about that, well, that's good for our country. But I have serious doubts. So another way she could go is a reassurance pick, which is to get a general, to get Mark Milley, to get John Kelly, to get McRaven, to get Jamie Dimon. Interestingly enough, put someone on the ticket who, toward the independents or for the suburban moderates who've never liked Kamala Harris. I kind of that's kind of reassuring. So that's another way she could go.
Okay, so all I'm saying is structurally, this is a winnable race for Democrats, but not with Biden. But you're saying Kamala's unpopular. Maybe they shouldn't just somehow get it to Biden just doesn't get it to Kamala because of her unpopularity. And this is the reason why we're in a thicket, because the thicket is something unprecedented is already going to happen if Biden leaves the race. Can the Democrats survive 4 unprecedented things between now and Labor Day? Because Biden leaves the ticket, then there's uncertainty about who's running for president in November, and suddenly Trump looks like the stable conservative choice for keeping things on an even keel. Who had that on their bingo card? Seriously.
Well, he'd be having a field day too. I mean, just imagine.
Yeah. And as I say, you also have this thing where give Republicans an unlimited opportunity, if there's a race, to do oppo on all the Democrats. And suddenly any story that is negative about any Democrat kind of overtakes on center stage for 6 hours and affects all of them and makes them all look bad. And I just think, again, you need to limit the damage, and you got to get on your front foot instantly, because there's only 16 weeks left until the election, and that's no time. That is no time whatsoever. And so, maybe this is it's a Hail Mary play. So either you send 7 receivers down the field or you don't, I don't know. Whatever the situation is, Biden has shat the bed. He has put the Democratic Party in a completely impossible position, and I'm here for it. I haven't had this much fun in years, and I'm having fun not just because I really despise Biden and his policies and despise what he's been doing for the last 2 weeks with this national rent control stuff and this revising the rules of how the Supreme Court, is constituted and all of that, just in a desperate effort to keep himself going. But he's a bad president. He's been a bad president. He is sitting there not really changing his own policies on Ukraine when Ukraine is starting to turn the tide in this war, and he knows there is a possibility that a presidency might begin in January 2025 that will not be as receptive to Ukraine's victory as he is, or Ukraine's prevailing as he is, and he should be doing something about that. But of course, he isn't. So I'm here.
I want him to stay in bed, because since the debate, he hasn't really said a thing about Israel.
Right.
Stay in bed, Joe. Just let Israel finish the job, and then he can withdraw after that.
Okay, very quickly then, let's talk about Israel, and then let's talk about Vance, and they're kind of connected. If you had told me in 1996 that one of the dominating themes of the Republican convention, and I'm now talking about the old right represented by Bob Dole, nominated in 1996. The party had by this point turned largely pro-Israel. But in 1984, Israel's support for Israel was a 50-50 proposition among Republicans, and certainly among Republicans in the Senate and the House. And then as evangelicals really took hold of the party, things got better. But if you had told me 30 years ago or 20, that something that you would have a prayer for the hostages, you would have a hostage, you would have parents of a hostage on stage. You would have Shabbos Kestenbaum of Harvard attacking Harvard from the stage for its anti-Semitism. Elise Stefanik and Nikki Haley making speeches about the evils of anti-Semitism. Matt Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition asking the crowd to cheer for Israel and show its support for Israel. And you have, I would have thought that, speaking as a Zionist, that I had died and gone to heaven. And so this is very big, because the idea that Trump represented as we said in 2015, 2016, he had turned over a rock and had exposed a lot of anti-Semitism on the right. And he did. And that was real. And that it's not, I don't care anymore. Like that, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. He did the Abraham Accords. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He has, said Israel needs to do what it has to do to win. And the convention has been turned over on foreign policy. The only thing anybody is talking about in foreign policy is Israel. So I think it's pretty staggering, and it has to be noted.
Well, it not only has to be noted, one has to wait for the contrast at the Democratic convention, which could already be in chaos depending on the decisions that Joe Biden makes in the coming weeks. But the overhang for months has been the fight within the Democratic Party over Israel, the growing anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party. We saw in the recent elections in France and the United Kingdom the fracturing of the left over Israel and the beginning of a actual Islamist pro-Hamas politics in both countries.
Yeah.
So the contrast to me is already clear, and it was pretty remarkable. And just one fascinating thing, and maybe this can get us to Vance, is I've been watching the convention on live stream the past couple of days. I thought the second day of the convention, the second night, was very strong, really from top to bottom. Last night was interesting because the beginning of the convention wasn't very impressive. And then it kind of built up. And there was a moment there where you had the Gold Star families appear and talk about the lives that were lost in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the 13 service members, and the reading of their names, which was an extremely powerful moment. And then that went into Shabbos, and then that went into the Nutras and the hostages. And you just had this, again, what you saw on the second night, this incredible kind of flux of emotion, and it's an emotion here. And I was talking earlier this week about how you had God and family, and this was kind of country that was all kind of coming together, and it was pretty remarkable and very kind of just emotionally arresting. And what again, the contrast, the country, is this identification between the United States and Israel that I thought Shabbos Kestenbaum put so well, where he said something that we say on this podcast all the time: Jewish values are American values, right? And Israel and America, we're twins in many ways. We're both these covenantal nations. And the crowd went crazy.
Yeah.
And that is something you will not see next month at the Democratic convention.
And again, as an evolution in American as a matter of American sociology, this evolution of the Republican Party, let's not talk about the right, because that's a whole other thing, but the evolution of the Republican Party to being an explicitly Zionist party that is going to welcome Bibi Netanyahu next week to the chamber of the House, where he is going to give a speech that liberal Israelis are angry that he will be giving, and I'm sure liberal American congressmen are going to be angry that he is giving. But this is a very significant, I mean, it's significant for us, but I mean, this is a very significant one of the very rare trades. Like, there aren't many policies that have been traded. The Democratic Party was the Zionist party in the United States. Now the Republican Party is the Zionist party in the United States. It's sort of like Kennedy did the first supply side tax cuts, and then Reagan took that issue away from Democrats forever. So it doesn't happen that often, and it's worth noting.
It reminds me. I mean, this is a kind of a silly parallel, but if you think internationally, what Obama did to drive the Israelis and the Saudis and the Sunni kingdoms into each other's arms, by siding with their enemies, but by Obama sort of embracing Iran to the extent he did. There's something of that here domestically. The Democrats not taking the lead in quelching the pro-Hamas hordes, the anti-Semitism everywhere, driving the Jews and the new right and the Republican Party generally into each other's arms.
So also, just to finish my thought, though, the Gold Star families and the Nutras and Shabbos Kestenbaum, that was like the emotional apex of the night. But it came an hour before the primetime keynote by J.D. Vance. So it was a weird emotional curve to last night. And in fact, and we'll talk about this, but in some ways, what was remarkable about Vance's speech was its emotional temper and it's almost negative energy. Yeah. And so you had this moment earlier in the night, which is just filled with emotion. The stadium was just incredibly connected to and moved by what was going on the stage. I mean, the reading of the service members' names. Contrast that, by the way, to 2016, when, of course, the Gold Star families at the Democratic convention, Khizr Khan, attacked Trump. So we have a complete reversal on that, to accompany the complete reversal that's much larger between the two parties on the question of Israel. But then that builds up, though, to this speech from the new vice president nominee that was kind of odd, frankly.
Yeah. Okay. Abe, the elephant in the room didn't bark. Mixed metaphors. And this was something that you noted. So Vance's speech was most notable, I think, really politically, for what he didn't say. Yeah. Right. And what word did he not speak?
Ukraine.
Yeah.
I was personally heartened by this, because it says to me, at least he's not looking to put that out there as a marker, as a sort of promise, as a place where he's going to stand, as withholding aid to Ukraine and giving up on Ukrainians' fight against Russia. And I think generally it also told me what I suspected it was sort of known to be the case, which is that foreign policy is Trump's foreign policy is what Trump is going to do in terms of foreign policy. It's not J.D. Vance's foreign policy. He doesn't want to give up a war to Russia, as far as I could tell, at least not intentionally. And so I think there's more room there in terms of a Trump administration for creative policies that hopefully will benefit the Ukrainians.
This is an important point because he started the speech by saying that there's a big tent. People can disagree. Don't you love being in a party where people disagree? That's really important. We're intellectually serious. And, sometimes I listen to my colleagues in the Senate and they change my mind. Now, why would he say that? And remember that when it came to domestic policy, his agenda, as spelled out in the last 10 minutes of the speech, that wasn't trimmed. Like, he didn't trim his sails so that Trump could name Jamie Dimon Matt's candidate for vice president, the Republican in the Democratic Party. Jamie Dimon has also been mentioned by the great mentioner for Treasury Secretary under Trump. And if that's something Trump really wanted or something, you could imagine that he would tack to the center on economics, right? Like, if you're tacking and you're etch-a-sketching, Vance could have said, we're for equality of opportunity, we're for this, we've done entrepreneurship, using the rhetoric that Republicans use to try to be populist without being protectionist or isolationist or whatever. And Vance didn't go there. He was totally himself on, we're going to keep jobs home. We're not going to have any illegal aliens anymore. We're going to build Made in America is beautiful. It makes you cry every time you see the label in your shirt and whatever. But on foreign policy, he basically went nowhere except to say, we're not going to send our kids we're only going to fight when we must. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, yes, because we didn't do that before. And even strawman, in a weird way, didn't strawman Biden, because he didn't say, we're fighting a war in Ukraine we don't need to fight, because of course we're not fighting the war in Ukraine. There's not a single American on the ground in Ukraine.
Okay. Well, there wasn't really a policy speech. It was a kind of an introductory speech. As I said, I found the speech kind of odd. His energy was very normie energy, which I think is positive for him, because Vance has this issue. No American knows who he is. Okay. And when you're a politician thrust into the national spotlight, you really only have one or two chances for the American people to decide whether they like you or not. And I think the normie energy he brought to the speech will help a lot of Americans, to the degree that they know who the vice presidential nominee is, which won't be many. But they say, okay, he seems like a nice guy, and he was kind of cracking some jokes. He talked to the audience. That was another thing that I thought was kind of unusual about the speech, is that the audience dominated the speech. So you had all these moments where he would say something, and I think he was maybe a little nervous. He is, after all, 39 years old, and the crowd would begin chanting, and he would spend minutes interacting with the crowd. But I mean, this is his speech. This is his moment to introduce himself to the United States and to the world. There were some very touching moments. I think the emotional connection was when he talked about his mom, and he said that his mom is 10 years sober, and the cameras all went to his mom sitting in the presidential box next to Speaker Mike Johnson. And the crowd started chanting JD's mom.
JD's mom.
Yeah.
JD's mom.
That was great. That was a great point. The other great moment was when he talked about Mama, and he said that when she died in 2005, they found 19 guns loaded throughout the home.
Pistol. Yeah.
The crowd loved that. And he said, this is America. That's the type of Americans. That was a good moment. But it was not a policy speech. It wasn't even really an attack speech. Typically, think about Cheney's speech to the 2004 convention, just a relentless assault on John Kerry and national security.
Yeah.
With Paul Ryan in 2012, again, he's kind of Ryanism at the time. He kind of laid it out there. This was just, I'm J.D. Vance. Thank you, Mr. Trump, for making me vice president. I have these views about America and about American nationalism and nationhood. And I'm from Ohio, and he had the other
I like
crack about
Michigan.
yeah, I like Michigan.
like
Here,
Michigan.
let's not have we have too much political violence. It was I think it was an interesting introduction, but unlike any. I mean, after the speech was finished, John, and I'll close in this with two more points. I went back and I watched Sarah Palin's speech to the 2008 convention, which I continue to believe was one of the most effective political communications in American history.
Yeah.
And there it was like, okay, there was no question. And I was in the hall on that. And even my liberal friends at NPR, who I was with at the time, agreed. She stole the show, right? No one is saying J.D. Vance stole the show. But you know what? That's probably exactly what Donald Trump wants.
I completely agree with you. And I think that something, again, in terms of Vance's own life story and career, aside from climbing up from the chaos of his life, which, by the way, was not economic chaos, has to be understood. His grandparents who raised him were not affluent by New York City standards, but they were reasonably affluent people. It was the chaos of his mother's life and his lack of a father and all of that is what he rose from. But he's had an uninterrupted life of success. Goes into the Marines, finishes Ohio State, goes to Yale Law School, gets a job at a hedge fund, writes a book that sells 3.5 million copies, starts a hedge fund of his own, runs for Senate, wins the Senate, now is vice presidential candidate. And he knows how to deal with people. He knows how to be a person in the world who other people like. And he particularly proved that by being Trump's vice presidential nominee after saying a lot of really nasty things about Trump in 2016 and 2017. So what does that tell us? It tells us that he knew that he had to give a low-key speech. And I believe he wrote the speech because he's a writer, or he wrote most of the speech. The speech writers that we know, that I've known my whole life, or my adult life, or Matt, we know, the sort of the Bush team of Scully and McConnell, or there's a whole world of speech writers who would have written a better speech for Vance than that speech was. And that speech was low-key, not particularly effective, and not like a blazing introduction of a shining star, because Trump wouldn't have wanted that. He didn't want that, and Vance knew that. And that's the key. And Vance also knew that in that room, to get controversial about Ukraine, which is something that really does divide the party. Remember, almost, there were half the Republicans voted for the aid package. So, he knew what he was doing, giving a speech that was not dazzling, because he wrote a dazzling book. Now, he's not a speechwriter, but I'm just saying, like, it's a gimme. He could have thrown the populist chum or the anti-Biden chum, and he didn't do it.
So just two things about Vance. I mean, the first is he's more of a governing pick, if you want to put it that way, because than a political pick. Though it's clear from the speech that the Trump team believes he will have some appeal in the Rust Belt. And to hear him talk, it almost seemed like, the country extended from Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Kentucky were the only states.
Graveyard in Kentucky.
Yeah, I mentioned Kentucky. Those are the only states in the United States.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, that's what the campaign thinks is where his political appeal may be. But in office, as the vice president of the United States, in the Eisenhower building, he will be assembling a team that has spent years now thinking through what the America First agenda looks like, both internationally and domestically, and that team will be in place. And so what I found interesting about the speech was the Democrats are very good at masking big policy changes with very friendly, moderate-seeming politicians. And in a way, that's what we have here with Vance, because he comes across as a young man, a young father, clearly very accomplished, clearly very approachable, low-key kind of energy. But behind the scenes, there's a real intellectual revolution taking place in the Republican Party that he is at the forefront of, and that will continue. One other thing, I consulted my resident Nixon expert, Mr. Andrew Ferguson, this morning. Richard Nixon did not speak to the 1952 Republican convention. So Nixon's real national debut, I mean, he had already had a reputation because of the Hiss case, but his real national debut was the Chequers speech, where he was, he defended his campaign finance practices in order to remain on the ticket. So we don't have that one-to-one comparison here, but like Nixon, Vance has a long tail because he's going to be 40 years old if they win, and he will dominate politics for decades to come if they do.
And that's scary, and I think we should understand it as scary. I think his economic policies are awful, and the ideas that he spelled out were awful. My one consolation, Abe says Trump will be making policy, and that's absolutely right, and that's also true of domestic policy. And remember that the Mike Pence game in 2016 was to say Donald Trump will protect this. Donald Trump is for the free market. He just claimed his own views as Trump's views, and nothing that Pence said had anything to do with how Trump ended up governing. That was a gimmick or a game that he played to say Trump believes what relative normies like me believe. And again, once again, last point, and then we have to run. Did you know that the Republican Party is a pro-life party? Because it's been 3 days now, and J.D. Vance is somebody who said he supported almost without exceptions abortion, ban on abortion from birth, a national law imposing abortion, imposing essentially the Dobbs case as national law. He is the most right-wing senator on abortion, and some maybe Tommy Tuberville a little more. I didn't know that the Republican Party has any views on abortion all of a sudden. It's pretty amazing. We got to run. We will. So we're going to forego the what was I going to say?
The recommendation.
Forego the recommendation.
No recommendation today.
No recommendation today, but we will be back tomorrow to talk about the big speech. And of course, something else is going to happen today that is going to maybe, blow that out of the water, because that's the way things are going. And we'll get some kind of an update from Rehoboth or Wilmington or wherever the hell he is. Lear, see who gets, see him raging on the heath. And until then, for Abe and Matt, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.